wants to read about the things that they're most likely to play. So, that when they're looking at games to review, of course, they're going to review the big AAA stuff, and then they're going to see, what do they have time left over to go cover.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay. Can we go back to game development portion?
Yeah.
And talk about, I don't know why my Alexa just went off. Anyway, in the game development portion, basically what's required to create a really good game? And the second part of that question is, do you outsource any of that work to vendors, or use tools provided by vendors? Basically asking you if you use everything that's built in-house or if you use other services.
Gotcha. Let me actually start with the second one, because that in some cases is a very definable question. Nobody builds their own stuff unless they have to. It's too expensive. And there's really good tools nowadays for every discipline. Remind me to get to the outsourcing right after this. But there's some very clear, so in game development, there are 4 big disciplines and then a whole bunch of, I'll just call them, 5 big disciplines as well as side disciplines. So the big disciplines are engineering, art, design, production, and QA. And each kind of has its own set of tools. So, if you're an engineer, you're going to go pick up Microsoft Studio. Basically the programs you use are going to be typical software engineering programs. Nobody goes out and builds their own version of, that kind of stuff unless they absolutely have to. As an artist, you're going to be using, Maya, Photoshop, ZBrush, there's a whole suite of tools for the creation of art. And, every discipline has lots of sub-disciplines. If you're an animator, you're going to be using things for animation. If you're, a texture and skin artist, you're going to be using Photoshop. If you're putting together cinematics, you'll be, using some sort of movie editing. So there's tools built for each of those. Nobody's going to go rebuild Photoshop to go do a project. You're just going to go license Photoshop to use. Mm-hmm. As a designer, usually you're using most of the Microsoft suite, Visio, Excel, Word. You're in charge of writing technical design documents or other things. Designers often are the only group that do use custom tools, or that they'll use a hybrid tool set made by the engineers, because they're also, if say you're going to go work on, a mess or any game, you're the one filling in the database values for, how strong are the fighters, or, you're working on the upgrade tree, or, you're putting in text for quest or, other things, that those all need to go in somewhere, to be referenced by the game. So that's usually almost, usually has some sort of custom element to it that's game specific. So that's the design group. The production group, the people in charge of basically all of the scheduling and, the contingencies. It's like, oh, this tool needs to be done before this group can use it, so this group has to finish it first, or, working on art pipeline, which is, okay, we've got a guy doing the concept and a guy doing the model. Then we hand it off to somebody else to do the rigging and then animation, while another person's doing the textures and the visual effects and then the sound effects associated with the model. So the production team is in charge of tracking all of that. And, they'll be using, is it, Assembler or SharePoint or, whatever else they're using, as their tracking software, or even, things on the web. Like my team uses some Trello as well for doing that. And then QA uses usually the same kind of things. There'll be some, database of bugs and other things, usually very similar to production software. So those are kind of the 5 big disciplines. And of those, only design tends to use custom-built tools that are specific for the game. And then the game itself will be built in an engine. So maybe it's the Unity engine or the Unreal engine, but that's kind of the thing that drives all of the different game components. And you can always go make your own game engine. But the thing is, there's, a couple of very good commercially licensable ones right now. So unless you have a very specific type of game that won't work in one of those engines, you don't go to the expense of going to build the engine, because there's good off-the-shelf options right now, all of which have great, at this point, or probably hundreds of man-years worth of additional tool development around them